I don't remember really talking much about faith at home, but I do remember at dinner my mom would have us pray before we ate, and then every night before bed she'd gather my siblings and I, and we would pray before we went to bed at night. And that was about it. I remember in middle school getting invited to a church camp, and I thought to myself, this sounds fun. I've never been to church camp before. A good friend of mine invited me. We played a bunch of games and we hung out late at night. We made some great friends, and we had services each night, and I remember thinking the services were really good. I never really felt the need to commit my life to Christ in that moment. I remember coming home from church camp and just getting back into my regular routine, hanging out with friends, playing sports. My dad and I had a strong relationship growing up until my siblings were born. I felt like when my brother was born, my dad and I's relationship just became disconnected a little bit and felt like there was a strain in our relationship. I started feeling like I wasn't living up to the expectations that he had for me. I felt a lot of pressure and just was stressed out and felt like we were disconnected. When I was going into high school, I had another friend of mine invite me to his family's church. He was being forced to go by his parents, and he was just excited to invite a friend with him. So I remember going to that service, and I remember sitting there thinking, this is good. I liked this service. I felt like the message was really good and I could relate to what the pastor was saying. So coming home that day, I remember feeling to myself that I wanted to start reading the Bible. I remember going up to my parents' room and I grabbed their Bible and I went back into my room and I started reading it. And I thought, I want to start reading this every day. And that lasted for about a day. And then I started getting back into my regular routine of life. My dad and I's relationship still felt strained. It felt like it was getting more and more disconnected. I felt like we were living in the same house together, but we really didn't have a strong bond anymore. And that was hard. I remember my mom was invited to this new church by her best friend. It was a church that had just been launched in our town, and we decided to go. And I remember pulling up to that church, going up the steps and seeing guitar handles on the door. I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is gonna be interesting. We walked in and it was dark in there and there were mover lights and there was loud music and it was a little smoky, and I was feeling excited though. I remember walking in and we got seated and I looked around and I saw people from my high school in there and everyone just looked excited to be there. I remember the worship starting and the song was The Power of Your Name by Lincoln Brewster. And I remember sitting there listening to the lyrics and thinking, wow, this is really powerful. I felt like each worship song was speaking to me, and I felt like the lyrics were speaking right to me. And then the pastor started his message. And I remember sitting there and I felt like he was staring directly at me. I felt like he was speaking right to me in that moment. I remember leaving that day and I remember feeling excited and feeling like I wanted to come back next week. And I was excited to just see what that church had to offer. I didn't really know what I was looking for in the moment, but I knew I wanted to come back. And so we started coming back week after week, and every week I felt like the worship was speaking right to me. I felt like the messages were speaking right to me. I felt like God was just like right there with me every week. I remember coming one week in particular, and the worship started, and they started singing Give Me Faith by Elevation. And the lyrics to that song say, I may be weak, your spirit is strong in me, my flesh may fail, my God, you never will. And I remember thinking, wow, those lyrics are speaking right to me. I remember getting emotional and I started crying in the moment, and I was looking around to make sure no one was looking at me. And then the pastor got up to speak, and I remember that week was special. I remember every week prior, I always felt like his messages were speaking right to me, but this week was different. I remember him saying, if you haven't followed Jesus yet, you can pray this prayer today and commit your life to him. And I remember closing my eyes and I remember praying that prayer and feeling this sense of peace over me, feeling like God was right there with me. I remember getting cold chills and I was getting emotional in that moment. And when we left the service that day, I remember meeting just a bunch of people in the lobby and getting connected and just getting excited to join a small group. I became part of the young adult ministry. Shortly after, I started serving in student ministry, and I was just excited. And the connections I was making just were strong, great connections with people in the church. I remember some of the pastors on staff decided to mentor me and speak into my life and help me pursue a relationship with Jesus. And I really felt like they became father figures in my life. I felt like they were just positive influences that truly believed in me and believed in all that God wanted to do in and through my life. I remember shortly after, my parents ended up going through a divorce. And it was really hard on my family. It was hard on my siblings, my mom. But I do remember in that moment thinking just about the people that God has placed in our life. My mom was involved in a small group. I was involved in the young adult ministry. My siblings were involved in kids ministry. And I remember being just so thankful for the people that God put in our life in that season that really helped us get through. I remember thinking to myself, I had this strain with my earthly father. I had this disconnect with him. I remember feeling like I didn't measure up and I wasn't living up to who he wanted me to be. But what I realized was that my heavenly Father loved me. He loved me for who I was, and he wanted a relationship with me. And from that point on, my life changed for forever. My name's Vince, and this is my Jesus story.